Teenage Nightmares, Fast Food Horror Tales. Hello, my name's Taylor. This story takes place in the winter of 2006. I had just gotten my driver's license, and like any teenager, I was itching for any excuse to take the car out for a spin. I was home alone one night, and hunger struck. It wasn't just about hunger though. I also just really wanted to drive. So I hopped into my mom's old Camry, the engine sputtering to life in the cold winter air. As I sat in the driver's seat, I weighed my options. There weren't many. The 24-hour McDonald's off the highway, or a sad, rubbery gas station cheeseburger. Neither sounded great, but the McDonald's was further away, and honestly, I wasn't in it for the food. I wanted the drive, the freedom, the music, the thrill of being behind the wheel. I regretfully chose McDonald's. I popped in a mixtape I'd made for myself, mostly my favorite tracks, the kind that made me feel invincible behind the wheel. The drive to McDonald's was a smooth, quiet 15 minutes, the highway stretching out under the pale glow of streetlights. When I finally pulled into the lot, something caught my eye. A man was standing just outside the gas station attached to the 24-hour McDonald's. At first glance, he seemed like any other drifter, but something about him wasn't right. His posture was stiff, his head slightly tilted, and even from a distance, I could feel his eyes scanning the parking lot. I'll be honest, strange-looking people aren't exactly uncommon where I'm from, but something about this guy was really weird. I decided to ignore him, shaking off the chill that crept up my spine, and walked into McDonald's. The harsh fluorescent lights inside buzzed faintly, making the empty restaurant feel even lonelier. I stepped up to the counter and placed my order, a McChicken, small fries, and a Coke. As I waited, I glanced around the quiet space. Every shadow seemed to stretch a little too far, every creak of the building a little too loud. My unease lingered, my thoughts drifting back to the man outside. I tried to steady myself, but reality began to set in. I was a petite teenage girl, all alone, in a sketchy part of town. The cold comfort of the fast food restaurant felt thinner by the second. Eventually, my order was ready. The cashier slid the tray toward me, and I forced a polite smile as I picked it up. As I turned to head back to my table, the door swung open, and the man from outside walked in. My stomach dropped. For a split second, I froze, gripping the tray tightly. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I quickly pushed the panic down. Don't be ridiculous, I told myself. You're being a jerk, judging someone just because they look different. I stole a glance at him as he shuffled toward the counter. His clothes were oversized and disheveled, his hair matted under a grimy baseball cap. He didn't make eye contact with anyone, not that there was anyone else to look at. Oddly though, he left before even ordering anything. He just lingered near the counter for a moment, glanced around the restaurant, and then walked back out into the night. I let out a shaky sigh of relief. That was harsh of me, I thought, but I couldn't shake the bad feeling he gave me. Something about him was just wrong. The uneasiness clung to me, making every bite of my food feel less appetizing. Finally, I decided I'd had enough. I wasn't going to sit here alone any longer than I had to. Grabbing my tray, I packed my food into the bag and headed for the exit. Before I reached the door, the older woman working behind the counter called out to me. Her voice was soft but carried a note of seriousness. "I don't blame you for taking your food to go," she said, leaning slightly over the counter. "That guy gave me the creeps too." I stopped and turned to her, feeling a strange mix of relief and unease. I smirked nervously and nodded. "Yeah, he definitely had a bad vibe," I admitted. She offered a reassuring smile, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of worry she couldn't quite mask. "You trust your gut, honey," she added. "Sometimes it's all you've got." Her words made me feel a little less guilty about judging the guy. If she picked up on it as well, then maybe I wasn't being overly harsh. But as I stepped outside into the cold night air, the prickling sensation along my spine didn't fade. I didn't waste any time. Clutching the bag of food, I hurried to the safety of my mom's old Camry. The moment I slid into the driver's seat, I shut the door with a hard thud, locked it, and double-checked the locks just to be sure. The car felt like a fragile bubble of safety, and I wasn't about to linger any longer than I had to. With my headlights cutting through the dark parking lot, I pulled out and made my way toward home. A few minutes into the drive, the quiet started to get to me. The hum of the engine and the faint rattle of the car felt too loud in the stillness. Needing a distraction, I reached for the radio and flipped it on. Music flooded the car, breaking the silence, and I started to sing along, trying to shake off the lingering unease. I almost forgot about the weird encounter back at McDonald's, but as the song faded out, the silence returned, this time heavier and suffocating. Then I heard it, a faint voice, low and deliberate, coming from the back seat. "Bravo," it said. My heart sank like a stone, the blood draining from my face. I knew without a doubt it had to be him. My mind raced, cursing myself for not locking the car doors when I went into McDonald's. The air in the car felt thick and stifling as my trembling hand gripped the steering wheel. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at me to keep my eyes forward, I glanced at the rearview mirror. There he was. His face was partially obscured by the shadows, but I could see enough. Those hollow eyes, the crooked grin. He was sitting there, motionless, as if he belonged. A scream tore from my throat, raw and instinctive, filling the small space of the car. He erupted into laughter, loud, unhinged, and echoing in the cramped space of the car. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. Then he leaned forward, just enough for the dim light from the dashboard to catch the glint of metal in his hand. A knife. A huge kitchen knife, its blade catching the light like a predator's teeth. As he whispered he was going to gut me. Panic overtook me. Without thinking, I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as the car jolted to a violent stop. The force threw me forward against the seatbelt, but I didn't care. I wrenched the door handle, flung the door open, and bolted into the freezing night. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, the cold air burning my lungs and cutting at my face. The night blurred around me, and every shadow felt like it was closing in. That's when I saw him, an older man standing by his truck, startled by the sight of me. He rushed over, his voice calm but concerned, asking me what had happened. I could barely speak, gasping out fragments of the nightmare. He didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone and called the cops. I told them everything, my words spilling out between shaky breaths. They assured me I was safe, but I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder, convinced he was still out there, hunting me. Shockingly, the police found him within minutes, still sitting in my car, the knife clutched tightly in his hand. He didn't try to run. He didn't even resist. Later, they told me the truth. He wasn't just a random creep. He was a full-blown monster, a serial killer who had murdered 15 teenage girls before me. I was supposed to be his final girl. He called it 16 candles. I was supposed to be number 16, so if you ever feel bad for trusting your gut, don't.